welcome to Waranara's Yuran. I'm recording from the Gadigal land in the heart of Sydney, Australia. Waranara is a Gadigal name meaning to seek, which sums up the mission of our Health Professions Education Research Network here at the University of Sydney. And Yuran means many voices, which our podcast represents. So I'd like to pay my respects to the elders, past, present and emerging of all the lands on which we're present, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening. With us is Professor John Gilroy. We're here to talk about his paper published in volume 83, number 6 of the Journal of Dental Education, Students Don't Know What They Don't Know, Dental and Oral Health Students' Perspectives on Developing Cultural Competence Regarding Indigenous Peoples, published with his colleagues Dr. Catherine Forsyth, Michelle Irving, Stephanie Short and Mark Tennant. Good morning.
Good morning. It's fantastic to be here. And your greyhound is gorgeous, by the way.
He's sweet, isn't he? So I wonder if we just begin a little bit more, if you tell us a little bit more about yourself, who you are, and then maybe talk a little bit about the rationale for the research that led to this publication.
Yeah, well, I'm a Koori from the Yuin Nation, so down the south coast. I often say it's the region of the best fishing in New South Wales. My dad, he's from the UK, so he's Scottish, mountain people.
Oh, wow.
He's known as, so he's Indigenous to there. And on my dad's side of the family, there's a long history which predates Queen Mary and all of that. So they have heirlooms of centuries old.
Wow.
When I went to Edinburgh Castle...
Should I bow?
Oh, not royally. My mum always said I'm a royal pain in the ass, but I think she means royalty in a different way. Essentially, I have a long history of indigeneity on both my mum and my dad's side. And my family have been practising the principles of reconciliation before the government thought it was cool. So my mum always said in her anti-racism rants that my siblings and I are products of reconciliation. So it was love between a non-Aboriginal man and an Aboriginal woman. So cultural safety, cultural competence has been practiced amongst my mob for a long time. So we acknowledge the devastation of colonisation. We acknowledge the pain that it brought about. So when David Berry came and stood on top of the mountain range there and said that he owns all the land, that's all my ancestors' land. And we fought against that. So challenging colonialism and colonisation from the learnings of my family is fighting against the values and desires of the colonial elite classes.
Okay.
So my family always spoke about that everyone's a victim of colonisation and colonialism. And the way forward to address that is through reconciliation, but also talking about and practising decolonisation and indigenisation. So decolonisation is deconstructing how colonialism and colonisation operates to benefit the elite classes of the coloniser, and indigenisation is working towards emancipatory practices of embedding Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledges, histories and cultures and values to break down the hegemony of colonialism and how that hegemony does not work in our interests.
That's a very rich history and a very rich contextual framework that you've woven for us. And I'm guessing that obviously, you know, this is part of the rationale behind this study?
Absolutely. So I primarily do research and advocacy for human rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with a disability. And I've worked with a lot of not-for-profit and for-profit government disability organisations, and also Aboriginal community-controlled health organisations and community services. I've also done a lot of work in Central Australia. So before I moved there to do some very large research in disability advocacy and allied health, among other things, I was invited by the elder women of the NPOI Women's Council, and they asked me, John, can you come here and create a research team to explore the needs of Aboriginal people with disability, or Ananu people with disabilities in the NPY lands. So I spoke to my elders and they encouraged me to go. And on the basis that there is a lot of cross-cultural learning between desert people, saltwater people. And when I was living in Alice Springs, I missed the salt air quite a lot, because I grew up on the coast.
Yeah, I know that.
They're my lands, the Yuin Nation. And at the time, I was doing some work in top end Queensland in brain injury. So basically working with the hospital sector to support Aboriginal people with traumatic brain injury to basically improve rehabilitation for when they leave hospital and go into the community. And as soon as my plane landed in Cairns, my hotel was directly across the road from the beach. I was like, oh, you could just smell the salt water. So I put my bags down, took off my shirts and just ran into the water. I was there for a good half hour. Next day, when I went for my morning walk, I saw large signs of crocodiles. I thought, holy shit. I nearly got, I'm a pretty big built person. I look like a seal or a manatee out there. A crocodile would love to have a feed of this. So that was rather a pretty big moment for me. And when I was living out there in Central Australia, working with Ananu and Aboriginal controlled orgs, as an Aboriginal man, I had to practice cultural competence out there because Aboriginal human rights advocacy, in some instances, is very East Coast metropolitan centric. So when I was out there, I realised, wow, I'm on another person, another mob's country, another mob's ways of living and doing and their values. So I had to exercise as an Aboriginal person, but on their lands, I'm not from there. So I had to know the right people to talk to, how to act, to understand their values and how they do things. Because I don't want to break their laws, I don't want to break their policies and procedures, and I do not want to encroach on their values.
That's fascinating. And I think that, obviously the concept of cultural competence is the focus of this paper. And, I just wonder if you want to give me a little bit more about what does it mean to be culturally competent? Is it just about knowledge of lands and of who to speak to, or is there anything further than that?
For me, cultural competence is a journey for everyone. Everyone is on that journey. And I think in much of the discussion surrounding this in the allied health sector, so not just oral health and dentistry, I'm talking about allied health, everyone is on this journey. See, there's cultural diversity in the population of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
Of course.
There is also sexual diversity amongst the population of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. There's also a diversity of views, opinions, and it's a very political space. So all Aboriginal people, when they go onto another person's, a region of the continent that is not their traditional lands, they have to exercise cultural competence, understanding laws, values, the history, the principles embedded by that particular community. So I have lived and worked all around Australia. I have, as I said, I lived in Alice Springs. I'm from the South Coast. I'm living in Sydney. I live on Tharawal country. I fish in their waters, but I also do advocacy with the Aboriginal medical services there, because it is not my land. When I go over to Western Australia, as I do projects over there, on Noongar country, I got to ensure that the AMSs there know that I'm there and the work that I'm doing. The Aboriginal disability workers are there, because I do disability advocacy primarily, that they know that I'm there, so I let them know. And they also know where I'm staying. So I could have someone find out from someone that I'm there and they'll just rock up. Let me give you a good example of cultural competence in advocacy research. So I do a national disability insurance scheme project, right, focused on the planning process. And with research, white fellas say you need to have a predefined region of where you're going to go collect data. You need to have a predefined number of people who you're going to interview, because this is how we do business. In many Aboriginal communities, it's not what we do. So yes, okay, so with data collection you have saturation. I understand that in a whitefellow way. Do you know the problem with saturation is, though? Is that you're limiting opportunity and choice within that particular community to be involved in that study, to have their voices heard. So how I go about it is I say, I'm going to be in central West New South Wales. Did I select the LGAs? Loosely. Central Australia, did I select the LGAs? Loosely. So that way people have an opportunity to be heard. So just recently I had the mob from Burke and Wilcannia who have heard of me, and they know who I am, my reputation is very positive. They said that they want to have a yarn up out there. Oh, yeah, cool. How many people are coming? They said, about 50 are going to put on a barbecue and we're going to have some of our AFL players entertain the kids. I sat back and thought, shit, this is going to be an expensive barbecue. But you know what? That's their way of doing business. So sure. I'm going to rock up, and if I pay for the food, I'll pay for the food. Do I need to bring some footballs? I've got plenty of them at home. I'll even bring my dogs. Because they want to have their voices heard. So it's culturally respectful for me to follow their lead. It's their families, it's their country, it's their community. And I've heard similar experiences of when Catherine did some work out there doing her oral health and dentistry stuff, trying best to provide opportunity. Because the only way that blackfellas can have a choice is when opportunities are made. Because then the choice is an exercise whether or not they want to take that opportunity. So with the work that Catherine has led with all of us, she embodied that level of cultural respect in collecting the data. She actually established an Indigenous standpoint theory with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And not just me, it's not the John Gilroy Blackfella show. She had a good advisory committee there. Uncle Bo was involved in it as well through Posh. And what really jumped out at me with this study, and I'll never forget this, because I was at an Aboriginal disability function, was it Penrith, I think it was? You phoned me up and we were talking about it. And I was outside having a cuppa and a feed at this conference, and she was on the phone to me, because I actually went through some of her scripts, because that's the model that we had embedded into the project. And that is that the dentistry and oral health sector, in my opinion, hasn't even reached cultural awareness, let alone be on the path to cultural competence. So that really scared me, because given that it is part of the allied health sector and it is very biomedical, they are actually working with people, working with community. And cultural competence, as I said, is a journey for everyone. But cultural competence requires people to basically critically reflect on their own values. Cultural awareness, in my opinion, is before that. So when you are aware that there's cultural diversity in place, and what I'm finding is in my journey of cultural competence, working with Aboriginal people as an Aboriginal person, is that there are people out there who, what I call, they do the helicopter propellers. They spin their arms around in front of them. Cultural competence, and then cultural safety, and then cultural security, and then cultural proficiency. And they just spin their arms around. They say, and they nod their heads. And I sit there and I say, I do, but you certainly don't. That critical reflection is essential to the journey of cultural competence. I could not have worked with the Anangu people if I didn't sit back and reflect on my values as an Aboriginal man growing up, living and working with Anangu people in the Central Desert. And this research, what I brought to this research is working with really good health specialists to essentially explore how we can actually improve the teaching and learning of students in dentistry and oral health, not just non-Aboriginal, but Aboriginal people too, because our Aboriginal students need to understand that they too are working in communities of cultural diversity.
Indeed. And I'm just thinking, you just touched on this point that was going through my head, is like, really every moment of every day, in every interaction, we need to be culturally competent. This seems to me like it's a life skill rather than just, we need to be culturally competent around Indigenous people. I think from what you're saying, you talked about gender differences, you talked about all different cultural aspects, generational cultural aspects as well, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And so it feels to me that this is much more than just something that we do in certain contexts, that it's triggered. It should be the way that we conduct our lives, would you say?
Yeah, let me give you a good example of what is not culturally safe. So, this last week, I went to the medical service out in the Camden LGA to have a rash checked. Right, I was itchy as hell, so I went, oh, okay, go over there, and the doctor there goes, oh, you are CTG, and I went, isn't that like a computer graphic? And he goes, no, you're ATSI. And I went, what? Like, I was just, it's the end of year 2020, it's COVID, I'm tired, I've got a newborn who wakes me up at 3 o'clock every morning. And so I was like, oh, can you just explain yourself? And he goes, oh, you identify as an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person? I said, yes. And then he went on straight away to do the Close the Gap assessment, which is what GPs do to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people under Close the Gap. And I was like, I'm just here because I want to get some really good cortisone cream to deal with this rash that's itchy as hell on my back, because I've been gardening, mowing the lawns and everything. And he insisted in doing it. And so that is kind of... So essentially I was...
So he was...
He enforced doing that. So he did my blood pressure and he did my heart rate and eyes. There's no point in him doing my hearing because I have rhinitis. I'm as deaf as a post anyway. And went through all this stuff, measured me, weighed me. I was waiting for him to give me a colonoscopy. Like, it is absolutely really disrespectful. And I said to him, look, can you stop doing this? I don't want to do it. I want to get back to work. But yeah, he went through it. And then what really shit me is that he wrote, because basically you've got this 5-page document that they go through, right? So your height, your weight, so on and so forth, that your diet, do you exercise, it goes right through all of that. And with the weight bit, he wrote down obese. And I said, hang on a second, mate, I'm 105 kilos, I'm just above 6'1", I am not obese. So just below 6'1", I'm not obese. I'm overweight, but I'm not obese. That really shit me. So can you imagine, right, given that I am a doctor, that I know about health and all that, I'm a health sociologist, can you imagine if someone went in there with some serious issues of their body or body image issues or whatever? This doctor who I've never met did all that. That is disrespectful to Aboriginal people because it makes us feel like crap. It is deficit-based. And he's not there to help. All I wanted was cortisone cream that I can't get over the counter. It requires a GP sign off for it. So imagine if that is a oral health or dentistry business, for profit or not for profit, and an Aboriginal person goes in there with decades of pain and trauma, of dispossession, living on the mission or Aboriginal housing estate, like I grew up in an Aboriginal housing estate, and having serious gum and teeth problems, and then meets a dentist with that kind of behaviour, equivalent to the GP that checked me out last week. You can imagine how bad that they would feel.
Absolutely.
So that is culturally disrespectful, because as an Aboriginal person, I didn't want to be treated like that, because my understanding is that that GP, I could be wrong, but I've got to check up on this, that GPs who do that get benefits from the government for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander patients. But like I said, I've got to check up on that, but this doctor was really, really persistent. So you can actually challenge that kind of disgusting behaviour through the university sector. So by having cultural competence embedded into curricula, where the next generation of clinical specialists will actually understand how to interact with Aboriginal people, how to interact with patients who are refugees, how to interact with patients who are descendants of migrants, how to actually provide culturally safe support, because culturally safe support for Aboriginal people actually benefits their health, social and emotional well-being. Because cultural and spiritual security is at the core of the human body. You know, healthy mind, healthy body, healthy heart, healthy body, healthy spirit, healthy mind and healthy heart and healthy body. So I felt absolutely wrecked after leaving that. I just flipped the bird. I will never go to that place again. I will drive to Campbelltown to visit a doctor, then go to the GP in Narellan.
And how far is that? Just to give everyone an idea.
15 kilometres, I think.
Yeah.
Something like that. So I live in Camden. And yeah, that absolutely blew my mind.
John, I want to thank you so much for talking to us today about cultural competence and your understanding of what cultural competence is. I think it's really enlightening to be able to discuss this with the examples that you've given us and really bring it to light. So what's next for you in your research?
Well, what I want to continue doing is working with the same team, so led by Catherine, and that is to implement the model, not pilot it. I hate that word. That P word is the worst word. Whenever I see it, I'll just walk away. I have seen a lot of universities and government agencies pilot something, but for Aboriginal people. But it's actually not for Aboriginal people, typically. It's for the institutions to basically get their credentials up, get their track record. I would like to launch it and build it with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander educators in the university. That's what I want to see. Because I think the Faculty of Medicine and Health could really benefit from this. There is nothing worse than doing research and propose something that can make a difference, only for it to be poo-pooed.
Yeah.
So we have the data, we have the team, so we can launch this. We just need members of the university to support us with this. And I feel that given that we have a growing number of Aboriginal staff, growing number of Aboriginal students, and given that the Faculty of Medicine and Health has around about 50% of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students, if we implement and launch this model, we could actually attract and retain an increasing number of Aboriginal students in dentistry and oral health. And that would make a significant difference, given that oral health in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities is far worse than non-Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And if we can have an increased number of dentists and oral health specialists across the country, then that would actually empower Aboriginal community-controlled health organisations and AMSs to actually deliver quality support and services to reduce the incidence and prevalence of poor oral health, poor oral hygiene, and increasing in benefits in that we know that what goes in your mouth influences every other part of your health. So not just gum disease, not just cavities and so on and so forth.
Well, that's an amazing vision, and I really hope that you're able to see this through to fruition, and hopefully come back with Catherine and talk to us about what you've done and your achievements.